1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are very happy you could come and join the second session of the program. That is the afternoon program. Many of you are thirsty, and we are working hard to bring you water, so please be patient with us. For our afternoon program, we have one of our speakers from Kenya. I'm sure he has spoken here before, so you know him, but at this time, I'm going to introduce him as the main speaker for our third training session. This is Mr. Boniface Wekasi. Mr. Boniface Wekasi Wayama is a holder of MSc degree and an ongoing PhD program in environmental policy. His professional work experience is in bioethics and research ethics for about over 18 years. And currently, he is the acting director for research accreditation and quality assurance at the National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation, commonly known as NACOSTI. As director, he heads the matters related to the quality assurance of research, which includes heading the secretariat of the National Scientific and Ethics Committee, accreditation of Institutional Scientific and Ethics Review Committee, registration and accreditation of research institutions, and monitoring and evaluation of research projects. He is also a founding member of National Bioethics Committee in Kenya since 2009. He has also hosted and participated in national, regional, and international conferences on bioethics and research ethics. On an international front, he served from 2011 to 2015 as the Deputy National Coordinator for the African Regional Cooperative Agreement for Research, Development, and Training related to nuclear science and technology. That is the UN body responsible for peaceful application of atomic energy. He is also the a member of the Governing Council of the African Center for Technology Studies, a regional science and technology think tank. Mr. Wayama has also held high-level international positions, including being a vice chairman of the Social and Human Sciences Commission at the UNESCO General Conference in 2009 as part of the Kenyan delegation to the Executive Board of UNESCO in 2009-2010. And Kenya's representative to the Intergovernmental Bioethics Committee of UNESCO from 2009 to 2013. It may interest you to know that Mr. Boniface Wekasi Wayama is also a national trainer in research ethics. Recently, I was privileged to be part of a training they organized, and I can tell you that he's an expert in research ethics. I'm so happy and privileged to introduce you to Mr. Wayama to present on the topic, the research regulatory framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that very elaborate introduction. I spoke here in the morning on behalf of my Director General, and now I speak on my own behalf. Good afternoon. Yes, the topic is slightly tweaked, not the one that could be appearing in the presentation there. for obvious reasons, that we come in as NACOSTI from a regulatory institution, and I think it would be prudent for me to just do that so that we can be able to sensitize, and particularly people dealing with research ethics. It was interesting, again, this morning when I heard the colleagues from the US talking about issues of research misconduct and the kind of penalties that are associated with that. I'll also take this opportunity to introduce to you a few of the penalties that we are associated, and we see whether there is comparable, yeah? And that's what I'm going to do this afternoon. Very quickly, how many minutes? See a watch here, but just to introduce my institution, which is the National Commission for Science, Technology, and Innovation, we have already said it's acronymed NACOSTI, established under the Science, Technology, and Innovation Act of 2013, but the institution is as old as 1977, meaning we've been around for about 45 years. In 2013, we got new mandate, and therefore the mandate slightly changed. But in terms of research regulation, we are as old as 1977. Key things is that we regulate and assure quality in science, technology, and innovation sector, and advise government on matters related thereto. And of course, we have the Act assigned 17 functions to NACOSTI. Those functions can be grouped into 4 categories, which we are saying regulatory, advisory, promotion, and coordination. And all these are aimed at harnessing and maximizing the benefits of STI to advance prosperity, security, health, environmental quality, as well as global competitiveness for all Kenyans. That's our vision. We have a vision which is there, a knowledge-based economy, as an institution whose mandate is about ensuring that research becomes core business. I think that's where we come in, and we'd like to drive this country to a knowledge-based economy. We facilitate quality research, science, technology, and innovation sector through regulation, promotion, and provision of advisory services. Things that I said are very dear to us are those: customer focus, professionalism, teamwork, integrity, and leadership. I want to emphasize integrity in respect of what we said here this morning about being compromised and what we do in a position where we are in, and whether there are any politics that are associated with research in this country. So we hold dear to that. Integrity for us is quite important. How do we do that in terms of quality assurance? We do 6 things. 1, we register research institutions, all of them in this country. 2, we accredit research institutions. 3, we accredit institutional scientific and ethics review committees. Elsewhere, they refer to them as review boards or IRBs, whatever the name it is. But here in this country, we have adopted now to use institutional scientific and ethics review committee. Very deliberate to bring in science. Previously, it was just institutional ethics review committees, but due to not divorcing the link between science and ethics, because we're saying for a proposal to be quality, then the science must be correct. And how is it correct? It must be embedded within the theories and paradigms that relate to the various scientific fields. So unless that happens, then we miss that out. So we now are emphasizing the concept of scientific to be able to see the kind of quality proposals that come out. Licensing of research, we do that. We do monitoring and evaluation, again, from various fronts. Monitoring and evaluation of research that we have licensed. We also monitor institutions that we have registered, and so on and so forth. Capacity building, in the narrow sense, not in the broader sense. We are not a certificate awarding institution or a degree awarding institution, but we offer capacity building to facilitate work that relates to quality assurance. So we have a curriculum which we have developed in consultation with stakeholders. And this curriculum is to build capacity for institutional members of the institutional scientific and ethics review committees. That is where we do. We want them to be well equipped to be able to review proposals in accordance with set guidelines. We also realize that science communication is a big challenge to many researchers. You are able to prepare, to have very good work. Unfortunately, a lot of this work does not go beyond from our shelves. And because of that, we have now introduced a course on science communication to be able to facilitate, to allow scientists to be able to communicate their research findings. Just a disclaimer, if you're following up from the presentation, you can see that this laptop is recording everything that I'm saying, okay? It will also record everything that you say. So if you have an issue with that, then let me know, because you'll be recorded, okay? I thought I needed to alert you on that. That's what is happening there. Okay, that's where we are now in terms of research regulatory framework. At the top, we have the Constitution of Kenya 2010. Then the major law is the Science, Technology, and Innovation Act of 2013, revised again in 2014. And below that, we have regulations. So that is the flow of the regulatory framework, so to speak. A bit of this from the Constitution. You can see that the Constitution 2010, under Article 31, talks about privacy, and that every person has a right to privacy, which includes the right not to have information related to their family or private affairs revealed. That's important. It has some implication on us as members of ethics review boards. 32, freedom of conscience, religion, belief, and opinion, again in our Constitution, that a person shall not be compelled to act or engage in any act that is contrary to the person's belief or religion, okay? And then 33, freedom of expression, that every person has a right to freedom of expression, which includes academic freedom and freedom of scientific research. Again, you find that in a Constitution of Kenya. 40, protection of rights to property, that the state shall support, promote, and protect the intellectual property rights, again, of the people of Kenya. IP issues, again, well enshrined within the Constitution. Environment, environmental protection, and children, that every child has a right to protection from abuse, harmful cultural practices, hazardous or exploitative labor, and so on. Again, you see that in the Constitution. More specifically now, within the Science, Technology, and Innovation Act, a few things that I want to bring to your attention. Under Section 12, subsection 1, it's about requirements for a research license, and I'll put that in yellow. It says no person, meaning no person. So if you're a person, it says no person. So I don't know whether you follow there. But shall undertake research in Kenya without obtaining research license issued under the STI Act. 12, subsection 2 says subsection 1 shall not apply to a person conducting scientific research within a university or an academic research program, a research institution program. Again, to underline the word program. And of course, section 3 talks about reasons why we do that. Section 13, this is still about licensing. But under section 15 is a bit of offenses now. This is about research misconduct, penalties that are associated with that. So it talks about 1, any person who accesses, handles, transacts, transfers, or moves any specified technology or material necessary for scientific research within, into, or from Kenya without a license issued under this Act, or contravenes the provisions of Section 12. You'll recall that I did mention that Section 12, it talks about research licensing. No person undertaking research without a license. So if you contravene Section 12, research without a license, Or you are moving materials, and now Section 15 even introduces not just materials, but introduces also technology. Again, of interest there, again, without the approval, then it means you commit an offense and shall, in addition to any other penalty which may be provided for in the STI Act or any other written law, be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 5 million shillings or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 4 years, or both fine and a jail term. That is what it is. I don't know whether that's about 5,000 US dollars, maybe not much. But if that is your pocket change, and we have a judge, and this judge is what we call a nice judge, for us from Nakosti point of view, a nice judge would be the one that would give you both the fine as well as the imprisonment. And you know the status of our prisons in this country. It is not a place you want to be there even for a single day. So whereas pocket change, you might be able to pay the fine, but when it comes to imprisonment, then you begin to feel what that means. Section 15 continues to give the offenses, and part of the offense is that the court convicting under Section 1 may, in addition to any other penalty imposed thereunder, order the confiscation of materials in respect for which the offense is committed, and may bar the person so convicted from undertaking any further research in the country or transferring or moving any substance or material in or out of the country. So that's an addition to the fine, jail term, and now we have the issue of materials being confiscated, becoming state materials, and so on. And finally, perhaps you may be barred for life not to do any research in this country. Why do we license research? Those are the reasons, 8 of them. National security, protection of lives of Kenya, public safety, protection of cultural values, intellectual property rights for communities, environment, research ethics, national development, and assurance of research quality. Those are the reasons among which we look for as Nakosti. Why do we look for this? The expectation, I'll be letting you know a bit with that. So if you look at that diagram, it shows research development and implementation process in this country, beginning with the proposal development, and I've said the responsibility for that lies with the principal investigator or the PI. And that is the person this morning I said holds the greatest responsibility in terms of research misconduct. So that's where the journey begins. So the next step is that that proposal must be submitted to a scientific and ethics review committee. Okay, AHSRA for that matter. That is a must now. So that's the flow and the scheme of things. Now, depending on the nature of the proposal, it can, if it's a clinical trial, for example, in this case, it would go to Pharmacy and Poisons Board, where I've written PPB. It's Pharmacy and Poisons Board. For them to look at it, whether it suits to be a trial for a drug. That's a clinical trial. When it is done, then that proposal is sent to Nakosti, and Nakosti will review, and in reviewing, it will take into consideration not the ethical issues that were looked at by the Ethics Review Committee, but those other reasons that I had mentioned, just to ensure that it's meeting those other national imperatives, okay? So that is what we look at that point. And also to give it just a second eye, okay? If the proposal is okay, then it is going to be given a license. Now, sometimes the proposal may require to be done in another area, or it could be involving transferring of materials from Kenya to another country. That gray box that you can be able to see there, then it means that after the license, that proposal will be submitted to those other regulatory agencies. I've put in bracket KEPHIS, which stands for Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service. If you're dealing with plants or seed materials, then they have to clear you, particularly if the materials are going to go out of the country for analysis. We also have NEMA, and again, issues to do with Nagoya Protocol, genetic resources of any nation, again, it comes into play. Then there is KWS, Kenya Wildlife Service. If these are materials or you want to do research in a protected area, because you cannot walk into a park, a national park in this country, just. So you have to be given a permit to be able to enter into the park. So you'll require that before you go to the field. Or finally, if you are dealing with genetic materials from livestock, then we have the DVS. DVS stands for Director of Veterinary Service. Then he will be able also to give you clearance. So the proposal then moves to the field for implementation. Then we are saying after that, there's monitoring and evaluation. Of course, that should be an ongoing process. And that can be done by the committee or by NACOSTI. And then sharing of results and then submission of the final report to NACOSTI. That process must be complete. And remember, we are saying that issues of research integrity can occur at any of those areas. Proposal development, at the ethics review committee, licensing, and so on. So they are bound to arise, okay? Just to give you a summary of some of the licenses that we have issued for the 2020-2021 so that you can be able to see. Just to let you know that, again, the majority of the researches that we have cleared are from humanities and social sciences. Those are the relative figures. When you look at the Act, it divides the sciences into about six fields. Here we have split one of the fields or science areas. So we have put them together as they appear there. But look at that. Summary of licensed research by gender 2020-2021. Why is that slide important? It's important because we want to show who is doing research in this country, male and female. The data there gives us 54.7% male and 45.3% female. That is people who are actively involved in research in the year 2020-2021. That is how we look at our financial years. What is the implication of that? We are not doing very badly in terms of gender, are we? We are okay. At least we are meeting the gender threshold. In this country, the Constitution puts a gender threshold of 30%. Is it? It's 33% of either. If you meet the threshold of 33% of either, then you're doing well. Here, we are dealing with 54 and 45, which is very good. This is contrary to some data that you may find out there, that females are doing about 20-something%. I've seen that in some old reports. But this is to show you that for the last 3 years, we've done this, and the figures are not changing very much. But what is likely to happen, which we can predict with confidence, is that the female gender is likely to overtake the male gender in this country. In this university, this is postgraduate alone. Is that correct? I'm sure you have more ladies here than men. Is that correct? No, maybe because it's an international, and therefore that could be the different scenarios. But the female gender is increasing when you look at the private universities in this country. People doing masters and PhDs at that level. We have more females actually in Daystar, for example. They have more females as opposed to the males. So we see that in the next few years, then the male gender is going to be endangered in Kenya. Now, summary of what we've done in the last 3 years, you can be able to see that. The reason here I wanted just to show is about the trends. 2017-2018, you can see 4,600, 4461. The number increased up to 2019-2020, and then it dropped in 2020-2021. Of course, we can attribute that to COVID. Non-Africans, I think the trend is worrying because you can see from 311, 397, then they dropped slightly in 2019-2020 at the out COVID. So you can be sure many of them could not come in or leave the country, and therefore the numbers went down in terms of research. Just to alert you again that under the Act, we see that the STI Act provides that rights, all rights in any discovery, inventions, or improvements in respect of processes, products, apparatus, and machines made on behalf of the institution shall vest in the institution, but may be made available for use in public interest. Again, that is just to show that the state can exercise a certain amount of control wherever there is a major scientific breakthrough in this country. And any publication arising from research work carried out by a researcher for or on behalf of the institution shall be a subject of approval by the institute or the research institution. Again, that becomes obvious. If you're using resources and facilities of a research institution, then it means that research belongs to the institution, okay? And therefore, the institution would actually own the IP, the intellectual property rights associated with that. The Act also provides ways in which dissemination has to happen. And again, that's going back to the cycle, you can be able to see that under Section 26. And of course, when you do not publish or do not make your research findings known, again, that becomes an issue. So that is why that one is there. And of course, this Act, in terms of supremacy, under Section 54, says that on matters of science, technology, and innovation, if there are any conflicts, the provisions of this Act, the Science, Technology, and Innovation Act, takes precedence over any other. To show you that there are other pieces of legislation in this country that addresses issues of research, and I've brought out some of them out, like the Industrial Property Act. This deals with IP, intellectual property. Seed and Plant Varieties Act. We also have Wildlife Conservation and Management Act of 2013. Of course, that's where KWS is established. Customs and Excise Act. When you are transferring materials across border, then it's important to disclose Biosafety Act issues of genetic modified organisms. Plant Health Inspectorate Act of 2012, that's where they talked about KEFIS. Environmental Management and Coordination Act of 1999, of course, the Universities Act as well. Just to mention a bit of that, in terms of issues of integrity, again, of course, this has been mentioned several in the morning, that it means conducting research in a way that allows other people to have confidence and trust, particularly with respect to methodology as well as findings. And this is why now we had to tie that this must be tied or must be reviewed by the Institutional Scientific and Ethics Review Committee. That you need to look at it from that point of view, because issues of integrity can begin to step there, and that is why we do that. These were mentioned in the morning. Again, they'll be mentioned in your subsequent discussions: research misconduct, defining it from fabrication, falsification, plagiarism, in proposing, performing, and reviewing of research, or in reporting of research results. Again, fabrication, which is making up of data. Now we have a Data Protection Act, and particularly human data, okay? So you may need, again, to make reference to that act, the Data Management Act, particularly with respect to human data. Then falsification, of course, you know what that means. We have challenges associated with this, and I'll be looking at, of course, the other forms of research misconduct, like violation of laws or research regulations or policies, misuse of confidential information from peer reviewers, failure to declare conflict of interest, and again, that may look like it's a simple thing, but you at the universities that know that is very important. If you're a member of an IRB, you're likely to meet proposals of students you're supervising or your colleagues or friends, okay? So that must be disclosed. And under such circumstances, we expect that one should be able to disqualify themselves from doing that. issues of authorship, okay, and so on, and there. So the question is that who has the biggest responsibility in terms of research misconduct? Who is supposed to take charge if such happens? Then we are saying overall, of course, in this country, NACOSTI has the mandate of regulation of research in Kenya, so we have the responsibility of investigating and whenever such issues are reported to us. We also expect the institutions themselves, okay, or organizations, which include universities that host researchers and many others. And here, I would like again to mention that there is the issue of affiliation, okay? We have some foreign researchers coming, and we have guidelines. You can be able to see that on our website. Previously, you would find a researcher comes and it would just be hosted by, for example, Dr. Josephine here just decides to host a researcher from abroad because they are working on some collaborative research. We are saying now we have very elaborate guidelines on how that should happen. It should not be between Josephine and the other researcher, but it has to involve the institution itself. And therefore, the person authorizing that kind of collaboration must be in a senior administrative position, preferably the head of the institution, vice chancellor, or at the lowest, a DVC. Why do we say that? Because if there is issues of research misconduct, then the university or the research institutions takes responsibility. And so for you to take responsibility, then you must be in a position to own that kind of research as well. General public, in terms of reporting, and research participants also, they have responsibilities in terms of reporting. Just to give you some observations and challenges as I finish this presentation, we have noted that, of course, there is inadequate mechanism for protection of whistleblowers for research misconduct in this country. That's a general observation. We do lack that, and people would fear. If you know of a student that, or your colleague, could be a faculty, who has committed research misconduct, how many of us are willing to say, I have read their work and I think my colleague has missed the point? How many of us are willing to do that? You would want to have it private and confidential, isn't it? But how do we, whistleblowers are not protected adequately. Again, another challenge, of course, is inadequate policies and guidelines for research misconduct at the institutional level. Okay, we see this is, you may have them, but unwilling to implement. Why am I saying unwilling? We have investigated several cases. NACOSTI does not offer a certificate or a degree or a diploma, but it can only make a recommendation. So the responsibility of what action to be taken thereafter solely relies with that institution. And we've seen institutions that are extremely unwilling to cancel a degree or to recall, for that matter. It's been difficult. That's what is coming up. I'm sure even this university, if it happens, you might find yourself in that same thing. Other challenge is the threshold of proof that misconduct has been undertaken. Again, it's quite high. Allegation of research misconduct is a lengthy process consisting of several steps, including inquiry, investigation, and recommendation. We've gone through this, and it's a tedious process. Okay? Sometimes institutions do not report research misconduct for fear of losing credibility. Okay? Those are some of the challenges that we do want. I want to conclude by saying the following. One, there exists legal and institutional frameworks for addressing research misconduct in this country. However, the legal framework requires strengthening if it's to be effective in addressing the current and emerging research misconduct challenges. We will work as NACOSTI closely with key stakeholders to review the legal framework, and of course, this is already ongoing, and soon, perhaps when we come up, we may wish to borrow some of those things that were presented by our colleagues from the US, okay? So that we can see how can we strengthen what we have now and how can we be able to address this. So we want to finish by saying we look forward. I hope you're going to have a report as NACOSTI, and this is a learning experience for us. Listening and sitting here and listening to the discussions gives me more information to be able to make NACOSTI even better in terms of its regulatory framework. So we hope that there's going to be a report, and out of this report, we can be able to see what can we pick as NACOSTI so that we can be able to take that forward. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention, and this is our building, and yes, we'll look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions later on when we are done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wayama, for enlightening us on the regulatory framework, especially in Kenya. Can we take 10 minutes break, or we go straight away before we take the questions? Okay. Okay.
Let's all rise up. See, when you eat lunch, the temptation is to sleep. Okay, let's raise our hands. Go on your toes. Toes. Stand on your toes. Okay. Let's go. Let's go. Again, slowly. Again. Okay, let's breathe in now. Breathe in. Out. If I have not said out, don't bring it out. Breathe in. Out. Taking more air. Breathe in. Out. Okay, let's jump a little in place. Okay, this is good. Now, our sister is really jumping. Okay. Okay, let's sit down. Thank you.
Yes, we are really enjoying ourselves after that delicious meal and after very thoughtful and quality presentations. This second session this afternoon, we are going to hear Dr. Ongo again speak to us. This time he's going to speak to us now, how do we protect the vulnerable? You remember he talked about the children, the pregnant women, and even those who are in prison. Not only the vulnerable, but also anybody who is participating in the research. And so he wants to discuss with us informed consent. Please give him undivided attention. You have something to take home. Welcome.
Good afternoon again. For me, it's actually morning, to be honest. I've been dozing off there, so I had to walk out and come back just to stay awake. Okay, thank you. In this session, what we're going to do is to look at the informed consent. You may look at it in terms of informed consent form. Others prefer to use the words informed document. Key things I want us to learn here is that it is a process, it's an educational process. And we will explain what it is. I know you know what it is. We will also get opportunity, if time permits, for us to watch a video. The Office of Research Integrity in Washington has put some educational videos that we use to teach research ethics. And in this particular one, the research clinic, we will be looking at one of the presenters. Her name is Jan, and we will specifically focus on that because there is informed consent involved. Key things: obtaining effective informed consent. We'll explain what that is. And of course, obtaining informed consent. That picture has the three key basic ethical principles when you are conducting research. There is the one, beneficence, there is justice, and then there is respect for persons. Informed consent focuses on respect for persons. Let me define, of course, there it is. That's the US federal definition of research. Research means a systematic investigation, including research development, testing, and evaluation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. That's a lot of stuff put in 3 lines. But the keywords are highlighted in red. You are involved in a systematic investigation, and you are adding to the knowledge base in whatever area of study you are involved in. A human subject, again, we are defining that because informed consent relates to that. One is when you are collecting data directly. Second one is when you are using data that is from secondary data with identifiable private information. So a human subject means a living individual about whom you as an investigator is obtaining one, data through intervention or interaction with the individual. Or you are using existing data, maybe from medical records that has identifiable private information. In other words, you can find names from the data. You can find maybe ID number, maybe a telephone number, things that you can use to readily link an individual to a study. Now, when you are conducting research that involves human subjects, of course, you go to your local ethics review committee or the IRB to obtain approval. So once you obtain approval, then you need, the first thing to do is to obtain informed consent from that human subject. Informed consent on the outset means subjects need to understand the important implications of decisions to participate in that research, and they actively agree to such participation. It's a condition that follows directly from the principle of respect from persons. So you are communicating to an individual. You want to prepare your document as if you're speaking to a single person, and you want to inform them in a language that they understand. So if I was going to collect data from Kisumu in a rural area, I'll probably have my informed consent, the one going to the ethics committee, in English or in Swahili, but I would also want to have it in Luo so that the people can actually understand what I'm asking them to engage in. It will tell them a lot of information. So comprehension and understanding of the content of the informed consent is critical in recruitment of a subject. The purpose of the informed consent is to actually explain the important aspects of the study to the potential subject in a lay language. I tell you, you will run into a couple of protocols where people use highly scientific vocabulary that even a reviewer may, if you're not in that field of study, you may find it difficult to follow. So think of a lay person. They ask that we write informed consent in a language that is easy to understand. Break it down so that the subject, the person you are asking to take part in your study, can understand, they can comprehend it, and they will be able to choose to participate or not to participate. Now, here is a caveat. no investigator may involve a human being as a subject in research unless you have obtained the legally effective informed consent of the subject or the subject's legally authorized representative. An investigator shall seek such consent only under circumstances that provide the prospective subject or the representative sufficient opportunity to consider. In other words, you give them that consent in advance so they can read, they can understand, so they come back and ask you questions on areas they do not understand. Let them have it for a week or for whatever amount of time they need. They say that the individual need to have that information, sufficient information, that any reasonable being would need in order to make the determination to participate. Avoid elements of coercion, appearance thereof, of coercion. Avoid using language that would transfer the liability of the study onto the subject. You, as the PI, will always be responsible for the study. So you have to communicate. If you want to call this a contract, if you want to call it a covenant, the language they use is informed consent. But communicate with your subject. I think I have to say that. The information that is given to the subject or the representative shall be in a language that is understandable to the subject or to the representative. No consent, whether oral or written, may include any exculpatory language through which the subject or the representative is made to waive or appear to waive any of the subject's legal rights, or release or appears to release the investigator, the sponsor of the study, the institution of the researcher, or its agents from liability of negligence. Are we together so far? Are you struggling like I was over there, or you are awake? You know, sometimes I found that when I talk, I can send people to sleep. Now, stay awake. Your salvation might be in this one here, right? Okay. Now, key principles of the informed consent process. You have to do a full disclosure of the nature of the research and the subject's participation. You have to tell them how you are connected to that study. Are you the principal investigator? Are there other co-investigators in this study? Do you have any conflict of interest in the study? All these things you need to tell the subject so they are aware, right? And remember, some of those things were already talked about or described in your research proposal that the IRB approved or the ethics committee approved. So if there was conflict, you described that, okay? So that the subject can have a full disclosure. You have to make sure that your statements or the descriptions of the elements of the informed consent is done in such a way that adequate comprehension on the part of the potential subject or legally authorized representative is possible. Okay? Now, we talk about legally representative because there are some people, especially people in vulnerable situations, who may not lack the competence to give their own informed consent. They need others to give consent on their behalf. Somebody who maybe has mental impairment, you want to involve them in the study. Remember, like the cases we talked about that involve a vulnerable population, the mentally impaired. There was one where even the parents were deceived. They were told that their children were going to join a science club. That was wrong. You want to make sure that you're giving these people factual, right, correct, adequate information they need to know for them to make decision to participate in your study, okay? They need to comprehend that information, okay? The guardian of the child needs to comprehend that information. So people who are vulnerable sometimes have legally appointed representatives by the court system, right? Or some other authority that needs to appoint them. And so while it is respectful to make them aware of the information, you need to tell their legally appointed representatives the same thing so they can consent for the participation. It is vital because there are studies where you cannot exclude people because of the benefits of the study. So those people would have to be included in there. The subjects must volunteer to participate in this study. You cannot coerce people. We were having a discussion during lunchtime, and Dr. Duane said, sometimes you can give potato chips to prisoners, and that can be coercive. Now, because it is not in their diet on a daily basis, right? Now, I'm starving chapati right now. Now, if somebody gave me that, I could do something, right? So you have to look into what it is that can cause coercion. Sometimes coercion by virtue of having a boss. Now, if my boss asks me to participate in a study, guess what? I'm likely to participate. That's coercion. So you have to watch as a reviewer, what are the sources of coercion? How does it occur? It could be motivation for money. Now, there was a Guatemala study which was very similar to the Tuskegee, where they also gave $1,000 back then. That was a lot of money. If I gave people $1,000 each here in Nairobi today, they probably would take part in my study, right? So watch out for things, sources of conflict of interest, sources of coercion, compelling people to take part in a study that they would have otherwise chosen not to take part in. So be aware of those things. These are the basic elements of an informed consent document or a form. One, you need to describe or let the subjects, prospective subjects, know that what you are engaged in is actually a research project. It is a research study. Tell them what the purpose of this research is. What's the purpose of this study? Right? Is it to find out how people choose to either be vaccinated for COVID-19 or not to be vaccinated for COVID-19? If that is the purpose, tell them that this research is intended to find out what made you make the reasons for either for or against taking COVID-19. The duration of the study. I've found sometimes where people say, it's going to be 6 months. Of course, there could be some longitudinal studies. But sometimes what we are asking or telling the subjects here is, how long is it going to take you in a session to give me your data? So if I was asking you to complete a survey, for instance, how long is that survey going to take? If it is 30 questions, will it take 10 minutes? Will it take 30 minutes? Will it take an hour? Let them know so that they can be mentally prepared to actually see whether they want to commit that amount of time for your study. Okay? Tell them the procedures. What are you asking them to actually do? How are you going to engage them in this study? What will they be doing from the beginning in the process to the end of that study? All right? Will they need to travel from Eastlands to Kiserian for blood sample collection? And will they have to take a bus or Uber or a matatu? Will it cost them money? Are you going to compensate them for that? Remember earlier, Dr. Duane talked about the respect for persons. If you are going to commit people, you got to let them know, especially if they're committing a lot of time, you'll be respectful to compensate them for that. Sometimes some studies can actually involve injury. That could be physical. You got to compensate them, right? So all that information needs to form part of your informed consent. It's always important to let subjects know that there will be risks in a study, discomforts, if you like. And when we talked about beneficence, it is the balancing act between the risks and benefits that are in the study. Now, benefits in a study is not the money they get. Sometimes people think that if you are going to compensate them, that's a benefit. No. The benefit, if there was really no direct benefit, the subjects can benefit from the outcomes of that study in itself. Their knowledge can go up and stuff like that. But sometimes you involve people in a study that requires screening. Maybe you are doing a diabetic study, all right? And you want to see, you have to have some screening tests done. And maybe in the process somebody discovers, oh, they have high blood pressure. That's a hidden benefit that they did not know. Now they can seek for some clinical intervention on dealing with the blood pressure that they have, okay? So that's a benefit right there. So tell the subjects. In the US, we have the federal defines risks in a study in 2 levels. They say minimum risk and above minimum risk, all right? So if you are doing something that will elevate the level of risks, for example, you go to Ukraine now, and you know that people are involved in war there, right? And because Putin has gone crazy, you ask the children to, as a researcher, to draw pictures of what it means to be in that situation, maybe at a refugee camp, right? Now, Shem told us about a study one of his PhD students, I think, did, where there was some level of risk involved. The student added some additional information that wasn't in there. Now, he talked about reliving the experience, right? Now, if you ask these kids at a refugee camp who came from Ukraine to draw you pictures of what it means to be in a war environment, you are causing them to relive, even though it is not actual, but their minds go, that pain comes back. So you just elevated the risk in that study. And so therefore, when there is a risk, in this case could be psychological or emotional, then you have to work out, describe in your informed consent to your prospective subjects how you will be dealing with that. In this case, and like in what he said, you may have a therapist available, a psychologist available, that would talk to them, not to let them cool down. Deal with the situation. Tell them that you will provide resources that will help minimize the level of risk back to normal. Are we together? I do not know how we describe it in our regulations in Kenya or in your country. But each and every institution, government has a description. Now, for us, when we review protocols from other countries that do not have bodies like NACOSTI, then the US regulations will apply. But we do not impose. We try to understand the culture of the people there and make sure that their welfare and rights of the prospective subjects are maintained. But always think risk and benefits. And if the risks outweigh the benefits, stop that study, drop it, pick on another one, okay? Now, if you are dealing with, there are some studies where alternative procedures are necessary, okay? If you are doing a study where alternatives are necessary, you got to describe that. For example, Dr. Duane talked about the Tuskegee syphilis study. And he said, did you know that penicillin was existing at some point that could have actually cured syphilis? But the researchers chose not to tell the subjects, right? Now, in the informed consent, you would have to describe that if this is what we are doing, there is an alternative to the situation you could use if this have happened, this is what you could use to help mitigate that. Confidentiality is a very important thing today. I know for sure in the US it is. And nobody wants their information out there, even though we collect a lot today with cameras and everything. But your information has to remain private. So think about doing studies with prisoners, for instance, maybe crimes they have committed, lots of violations they may have, and all those, if they share with you, have to remain confidential. So your informed consent, if you are going to collect identifiers, names, things that could easily link a person to a study, you have to tell them how you're going to deal with that, okay? You may use pseudonyms, so you may code the names so that nobody would see a name of an individual in your research report unless those people provide or give you a waiver, right, that they accept for their names to be reported in your research report. Compensation, we talked about that. Whom to contact. Sometimes subjects may have questions even after they have been consented, right? You have to give them contact information, the name of the PI, their telephone number, maybe the ethics. For us, we also ensure that you give the contact for the IRB, and so that researchers, the subjects can contact the PI if they have questions related to the study. And they can contact the ethics committee if they feel their rights and welfare is being violated. So contact information is very important in the informed consent document. And did you know that the subjects have a right to refuse or to withdraw in the middle of the study without any penalty? At least the US regulations provide for that. And you have to respect that. So when you are asking people to participate in your study, you have to seek their consent. And your informed consent should have these things. I once went to OHRP conference at University of Wisconsin, and where they said that somebody presented the largest or the longest informed consent they ever saw was a 54-page document. Now, do you know how dangerous this is? That's a paper in itself. And this is information you are providing somebody to take part. They may not remember some of the things you said at the beginning. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't include these elements. I'm saying be precise, provide sufficient information a person would need to help you in your study. All right? It could be a page or two. It could be 4 pages. But make it precise. Remember, it will be going to an ethics review committee. And if you are in one, make sure that the proposals that come before you, you help your researchers to understand some of these things. Researchers sometimes think that once people sign the informed consent, which equals effective consent, that they are done with it. I'm here telling you that the informed consent is a process. It is not a single event or just a form to be signed. Rather, it is an ongoing process that takes place between the investigator and the prospective subject. Why? Because things may change in the middle of your data collection. Subjects need to be reconsented. You need to reinform them that, this and that is taking place. Would you still want to continue participating in the study? And you have to respect the decision they give you Even then, provide them with sufficient information that they should be able to comprehend, and that it is in a simple and understandable language. I want you to remember that informed consent is not a single event. Beginning to sound like a broken record, right? It is a process. Educate yourself, educate the subject. Provide sufficient information in a language that subject will understand and that they are able to comprehend. An informed consent is documented by the use of written consent form approved by the Ethics Review Committee and signed by the subject or the subject's legally authorized representative. A copy is given to the person signing the form. That depends on the kind of study and the person also you are involving in the study. The elements, as I mentioned in brief, include the purpose of the study, duration of participation, tell them about the procedures, tell them about risks, benefits in the study, tell them that their confidentiality is of utmost interest to you as well. Provide compensation when necessary, provide opportunity for people to contact you or the ethics body when they have a question. Hey, so before we came here, we had to go and take a COVID test. And so I went, and Dr. Duen told me, any lab test now, of course, that's where we got our result. And they gave us an informed consent form. So I was checking Dr. Duen, and at the end, towards the bottom, they wrote, they said, number 8, this test has been allowed for use by the Food and Drug Administration, blah, blah, under the emergency use, blah, blah, blah. But they said something about the HIPAA regulations. I don't know if you remember that. And then I asked them, but where is the form? Is it the informed consent? He said, no, we have it. So I told the lady, yes, if I sign, will you bring it to me? From there on, a different lady came out. In other words, I don't think they had the HIPAA regulations form with them. It's called emergency. I benefited from it. So, but make sure that what you are telling the subjects is true and that you can give it to them. All right? Documentation takes a variety of forms. So that's just one way of documenting. That's another form of documenting. That's a waiver. If you want to include information from somebody, you have to ask them to waive that, all right? Their rights not to be confidential. Otherwise, you commit a breach of confidentiality. And now I'm going to show you a video, right? And in this video, if we get it working, I want us to focus on the process of obtaining informed consent. Now, at the beginning of the video, they talk about IRB, the Ethics Review Board. They also talk about research misconduct, okay? So that is important because we already gave some brief on that earlier. But let's work together. And the beautiful thing about this is you got to participate. There will be some questions in there, and you will tell me what to choose, okay? Let's see if it works.
It was not the finest hour for clinical research at this institution. An audit of a melanoma trial uncovered several deviations from protocol. Suspicions of falsification and fabrication prompted the IRB to notify the hospital-affiliated research integrity officer. As IRB chair, I met with the Rio myself. We think they just made up a lot of their data.
Well, yeah. All of the subjects' BU and creatinine numbers are the same here.
Plus, there's a subject who apparently dropped out, but they kept recording labs for. There were also the questionable premature deaths of 2 subjects and a lawsuit by another participant's family. An internal investigation was initiated, but that was just the beginning of the fallout. Key trial figures were suspended, namely the investigator and the clinical research coordinator. And the president of the hospital was left to deal with calls from the media, threats of donors withdrawing millions in research endowments, and concerns from hospital counsel over liability. How did this happen? Along the way, there were people involved with this study who didn't follow protocol, turned a blind eye to misconduct, didn't effectively practice oversight, and falsified or fabricated data. But you know what? It didn't really happen. I mean, it did, but it didn't. You see, in this movie, unlike real life, you get to go back in time. You can become an investigator, a clinical research coordinator, a research assistant, and an institutional review board chair. You get the chance to enter an alternate reality as any of these characters, walk in their shoes, experience their lives, and figure out how to make the ethical decisions that advance integrity in research. It's up to you to figure out how.
And so we are going to follow Jan Klein. She's a research coordinator. You can go back and watch any of those other people.
This is me, Jan Klein. Afternoon, Mr. Nelson.
Afternoon.
Just need to grab some vitals.
Okay.
I'm a registered nurse. I work at a medium-sized university-affiliated hospital. How are we today?
Fine, now that the Lakers are back on track. I was a 4-game skid. I was getting worried.
You do know there are over 60 more games in the season.
Yeah, of course.
I'm also a clinical research coordinator, and I usually have 4 or 5 studies on my hands at once. So, you know, not much going on. You ready to get started? Okay. Then there's probably my most important job.
Hi, Mom.
Dinner! My son. He's a huge jazz buff. I don't know where that came from. I owned a Kenny G CD once. This is nice. Medeski, Martin, and Wood.
Bill Evans Trio.
That's what I said.
Oh, you look terrible.
Morning to you, too. Annie Bailey, a fellow clinical research coordinator and friend.
Out clubbing last night.
She always knows just what to say. Yeah, just dragging. One of those days, I guess. Seems like those days have been more common lately.
Good morning.
Dr. Richard Sowers, otherwise known as Mr. Personality. I coordinated all of his clinical studies. We just started a new multi-center melanoma trial.
Jan, just wanted to give you a heads up. Scheduled one of my patients to come in later in the week. I want to get him started on the first phase of the trial immediately. Get the ball rolling.
I've worked with him for almost 2 years, and I swear, I still don't know if he's just absent-minded, sloppy, arrogant, or some combination of the 3. Dr. Sowers? Wait, Dr. Sowers? You can't start putting subjects on the study. We don't have IRB approval of the protocol. And you need an approved protocol before you can start the study. I can give Dr. Moore a call today.
I need the IRB in here like I need it.
Dr. Sowers.
Look, this makes you uncomfortable. I get it. But we need to keep the ball rolling.
Great. Why does he have to put me in this position? Well, he is the PI, and if he's fine with moving forward, even after I pointed out the problems, maybe I should just drop it.
Question, what should Jan do? Start treatment? Give the PI some pushback or talk to my supervisor? Talk to the supervisor. Thank you. We will go with that. Of course, the other options also take you somewhere. So just feel free to share what you think is right. So let's see what happens when
So I
she
visit my
talks.
supervisor and explain what's going on. She agrees to intervene. And
Jan, the subject I wanted to enroll? Let's wait.
okay. Oh, look at him. I almost feel bad. Oh, that's my son. You mind?
I guess.
Well, I'm not sure how this happened, but good.
What do you think happened? The IRB talked to him, right? You can do a study without the ethics committee approval. You cannot start a study. Dr. Wekesa shared earlier also, remember, you cannot, of the student and faculty, I think, on research where they had to call him to find out what can he do. Now, you cannot start a study without IRB approval. Always look around to find out if somebody's doing that.
Later, over a gourmet lunch. Are you looking up regs and guidelines online? You feeling okay?
I'm fine. Sometimes when I get a new protocol, I'll have questions. So I'll look up the latest guidance, see if I can find any answers.
You've been here longer than I have.
Doesn't matter.
Such a Girl Scout.
Hey, Princess Leia was a Girl Scout.
Yeah, this in the Alderaan years or the Betty Ford ones?
Definitely not the Betty Ford ones.
Oh, it's almost 2 o'clock. I have a patient who'll be on the floor soon. I thought Annie knew everything. I've got some questions about my own trials. I should probably get online and see what guidance is out there. You don't know what you don't know until you look.
So regulations could be changing and you may not be aware. It's always reasonable to be checking in your country. In the US, we do check a lot just to make sure that you are in compliance for the most part, all right?
Later on in the week, I've organized a meeting for the melanoma study staff. Should I do this more often? Like regularly check in with the study staff to make sure everyone stays on the same page? That could be good for Dr. Sowers, and also technicians like Tony, right? On the other hand, everyone's a professional, and I assume they all have mothers already.
So what should Jan do? Don't do anything, or although Tony and the other techs, part of the study melanoma trial group, are experienced professionals, that she needs to plan a regular meeting. Which option do you go with? Do nothing or do the other one? Regular meetings. Let's see what we get.
So yeah, why not follow up with Tony and the other technicians? So I worked out a system with the techs, set up weekly individual meetings with them to review the protocol, discuss subjects, report any deviations, and field any questions. Yay me. But should I also follow up with Dr. Sowers?
What do you think? Yes. Pull him aside and talk with him, right?
So I set up a weekly meeting with Dr. Sowers also. Well done.
Say that again. That's very true. So you have to be very tactful. It could cost you your job, right? But it is important to talk to him, because if you don't do it right, you also will be subjected to the consequences that may come with that.
If I do say so myself. The melanoma trial is moving forward, and we're obtaining consent from potential subjects. Wendy Casper.
I have a question.
And her son, Winston.
Yes.
Is she starting the trial today?
We're actually just going through the consent process today.
We don't need to waste time with that.
Winston.
What? She's already read and signed that. Show her.
Yes, the copy I emailed you. I need you to sign this copy.
Okay, give her a pen.
Not exactly how it works.
It's obvious that the Caspers want to participate in the study no matter what. And it's not like I don't have a million other things to do. If they don't care, maybe I should just let her sign.
What do you think? Tell the subject I need to be thorough, or placate her by presenting just the most basic elements? Need to be thorough. I agree.
Okay, let's do this.
Mr. Casper, I need to go over this with her face to face to make sure she understands.
But she already read it.
Winston.
Mom, it's okay. So if she's not starting today, when will she?
Soon.
Soon?
Honestly, it could be a week or so. I need to go through this first. I need to make sure your mother understands the trial and all of her options. And then there are the tests she has to take.
More tests? You do understand how sick my mother is?
Yes, of course I do.
We have to get this thing going. Can she take these tests today? And this consent, can you just go through your spiel quickly?
Winston, please. I apologize. Believe me, he means well. I might have said it differently, but I share his feelings. I need to start this as soon as possible. And to be honest, I'd agree to anything to be a part of that trial, no matter what.
I know.
Did you hear that? She is willing to do anything to be part, no matter what. Did you see the vulnerability in that? You have to pay attention. You have to make sure that they understand what they are taking part in.
It's a lot, but this is very important for all of us. I need to make sure you understand and feel comfortable. The purpose of this study is to compare two treatment regimens. One is the newly FDA-approved BRAF inhibitor, Arifinib. Now, it's important to remember that Arifinib is for those patients who did not respond to chemo, and that is only mildly effective. So there are two groups. One group will get Arifinib with placebo, the other group will get Arifinib with standard care, to see if the chemo will act as an adjuvant to the new drug and make it more effective.
Oh, no. No, Miss Casper, please stay with me. She's spacing out. Can't really blame her. Am I just wasting everyone's time? What now, genius?
What should she do? Push through, although she might be confused? Wendy isn't listening anyway, so give the abbreviated version. Take the extra time to really make sure she understands. Huh? Extra time. I agree with that also.
Here we go.
Hold on. I want to make sure you're getting this, Miss Casper. Would you mind repeating back to me what the purpose of the study is in your own words?
Well, there's this drug called Arifinib, and you're trying to compare two different kinds of treatment, and the two treatments are...
One is Arifinib with standard care.
Right, Arifinib with chemo, and the other is Arifinib with placebo.
So she will definitely get the Arifinib, but she may or may not receive the standard treatment?
Let me explain.
Let her explain.
And
side effects include rashes, fatigue, joint pain, extreme sensitivity to light.
Okay, fasten your seatbelts. This gets tricky.
The randomization will be done by pharmacists and is blinded. You'll either get Arifinib with placebo or Arifinib with a standard regimen of dacarbazine.
No problem. Just back up a little.
Ms. Casper, would you mind repeating that back in your own words too?
Sure. No one in the study knows who's getting what treatment, not me or you or Dr. Sowers.
Correct.
Eventually, we get to the end of the process.
And did you have any more questions? After everything I've said, would you like to participate?
All right. Took a little time, but Miss Casper understands what she's signing up for.
So she obtained an effective, informed consent. She was able to go through the document and explain, gave opportunity for her to ask questions, and then you respond. If there are questions, you clarify before you actually have them ready to sign the document for you. If you have any questions on this, that is where we are heading now with a Q&A for my brother Wekesa and I, his previous presentation, and the presentation he made and this one here. Otherwise, I hope you got something on what an informed consent is, and that you will be able to administer this in our search or pursuit of improving, promoting research integrity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ongo, for the presentation. We have some questions online, and I believe you also have some questions here. So we can engage ourselves. We are closing at 4. Let me see, because we want to give you time to rest. We are closing at 5. So because there will be a wrap-up. Today we are closing at 4:20. 4:20, so we'll keep that time in mind. Let me see, by the show of hands, those of us who have questions. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's keep it at 4. Calvin, do you have the mic? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Two small questions. The first one is, there might be hidden forces, like now you saw the son saying, yeah, mommy, just sign this, you know? Now, for those of us who work with the local communities and mothers, the wife will say, no, I've got to go and ask my husband. There is that. But there is also the issue of local leaders who, in the case in which I was involved actually, a local leader told the mothers who were bringing children for vaccination that you must participate in this research, because if you don't and you come back again, they will not vaccinate your child. You know, those types of forces. And some of them we've no control over as such. Even when we've explained all the details to the mothers, still, you know, they listen to their local leader more. Yeah, so there is that aspect, and it would be good to talk about it. The other one is, if you are dealing with not humans in this case, but animals, how do you get their informed consent? Yeah, you are laughing. Actually, it happened to me because I was working on mosquitoes, which we are feeding on laboratory rats. Now is when I start thinking, oh, that time there was no proper issues of IRBs and so on. It is a number of over 25 years ago. So, but now I'm wondering, how do you get informed consent from mosquitoes and rabbits?
Two questions there. The first one is dealing with more, especially ethnographic research, where you may find communities. IRBs advise that there are certain communities where first the consent comes from the community leaders, because they know the intricacies of the area, and so you have to seek their approval. It works more or less like institutional approval, where somebody is asking to collect data from AUA, and if AUA did not have a local ethics review committee, they would provide consent before you go to the other people. So it is important that you respect the community by going to the elders first, and then you can now go to the people. There are certain studies, and of course the ethics committees will review and see where dynamics may not work in the favor even of, say, a woman involved in a study where the husband may not be comfortable. So you still have to find ways of, if this study was to go on, how do we protect the lady? Okay, so that there has to be that communal level consent before you go to the people. After all, if they consent, they would actually be helping you in proceeding with the remainder of tasks in that study. One thing I did not mention is that the children, when they are involved in a study, they do not give consent, but they give assent. So this has to be, if you are presenting instead of informed consent, you have to have some script, a very brief one, done in very basic language, that you will read to the children to obtain affirmative response. That way you are also showing the children respect. But where children are involved, you also have to obtain parental consent or the legally appointed guardian. Now, on to question 2. How do we obtain consent from rats? No, they will not talk to you. Now, we have what is called AHSRA, which is a different body that deals with studies that involve animals with vertebrates. In the US, the role of the body is to ensure that the use of those animals, we are not abusing them. So, for example, where you could involve just using a mice, you're not going to use so many, okay? Our neighboring University of Notre Dame in 2020 was indicted, but they reported themselves and worked out a solution because they found some rats dead in their cancer institute over there in South Bend. And it was headline news on the South Bend Tribune. So AHSRA does what IRB or ethics do for humans. AHSRA deals with animals, and it is more on the acquisition and use of those animals. The tendency is not to abuse them. Otherwise, we have people who will protest. They will show up on your campus and with placards when they know you are abusing the animals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, as a researcher, I know that it is good practice to compensate. For example, if I go to the rural areas and I want to do a research there, and I'm taking their time, it is good practice to compensate them. But to somebody else, that may look like coercion. So where do I draw a line between compensation and coercion?
Some of the guidelines that we use sometimes, for example, if I was going to engage somebody in Nairobi, I'll be looking at the cost of living in Nairobi. I'll be looking at how much would that person make if he was employed, say, in an hour, okay? And somebody living in a rural area in Kisii may make a different amount. So you want to be guided by what somebody would typically make so that the idea of coercion is eliminated. If you give a lot of money, people would readily show up. And they may not even give you valid data because their mind is on the money. That's what they want, okay? So use the local guidelines, what somebody would make. Don't give them a lot of money. And the IRB would actually, or the ethics committee, would be looking at that. Recently, we were looking at a study in Thailand, and the individual was proposing giving about $45. But I was pleasantly surprised when I looked and I found they actually were going to make the same amount of money if they actually worked. So that wasn't coercive. So look at those guidelines. What would somebody make in that particular location per hour, depending on the amount of time you are asking?
Okay, let us take one question from the online group. And this question is directed to Mr. Wakesa. The question says, One question based on the presentation by NACOSTI representative. Once I have submitted my work to the Institutional Research Committee, should I also submit the same to NACOSTI?
Thank you very much for that question. The answer is yes. Once you get your approval, ethical approval from accredited committee, then that forms part of the documents that you're going to submit to us. Remember, I gave you a criterion which we look for when we are doing the license. And for us to see whether that is also in compliance, then we need the proposal. We need to also the proposal that has been approved by the Ethics Review Committee. There's been a tendency that sometimes people send proposals that were not yet approved. And I want to urge the committee, and this committee once it begins to work, is that you must find a way of either authenticating that proposal, that this is the one that now you have approved, by either signing on every page or finding a way of authenticating it so that when we receive it, then we know that is the final proposal that you actually approved. So the original, the approved proposal, together with the letter, plus your photo, plus some fee that you pay. There are other requirements that you'll see that because our process is fully automated, so you don't need to come to NACOSTI. You'll be guided on the system on what to find out. And then I wanted to add the issue of animals consenting. I think in Kenya here we have 34 accredited institutional scientific and ethics review committee, and about 3 of them have been accredited to deal with in animals, not human beings. And they have very specific standard operating procedures which we look for before we accredit. And those procedures state clearly how are they going to handle animals. It may not be consenting, but there is a very clear mechanism of doing that. And when we do our M&E, we want to look at whether that is being followed to the letter.
Good, good. Let's take one question from here, then I'll come to you. Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to know the following. Do I need an informed consent when using stored specimens? Like I've gone to a blood bank. Will I need an informed consent? Will I need an informed consent form when using discarded specimen? Like for example, I wanted to extract things from the placentas of ladies who have just given birth, and the placenta is destined to be thrown away. Will I need inform this again for amputated organs, like for example the legs of those elephantiasis which have been amputated and thrown away? Thank you.
Any one of you answering?
Discarding specimens. In the US, we had revised regulations in 2018, but discarding specimens falls under the expedited category. I think is category number 5. And usually when, if say you are collecting placenta or whatever, if they were going to be used for research purposes, then they would be stored, not really discarded. And in the revised regulations, we now have levels of whether a full informed consent would be required, or you would get permission to use them under what does not require new consent. So it varies from one country to another with their regulations. Yeah, if it is de-identified, then you don't need any consent. That's de-identified almost is like, not really even exempt. That will almost be like using census data. You would not need even IRB approval to use census data. It's de-identified, we know who de-identified it. But if you know the person who de-identified, then you can easily get the key to the de-identification and re-identify them. So, but de-identified, you don't need any consent.
Maybe there's a similar question here. It says, do we have studies that are exempted from our IRB?
Yes. So in the US, we have 3 levels of review, and we could talk about that now. Level number 1, when it talks about exempt from review, it doesn't mean that it is not going to IRB or to the ethics review body. You still have to send it. They have to make the determination that it is exempt. What it means is that it is exempt from further review, and there are 8 subsections, categories on that right now. So there are studies that are exempt, but the IRB or the Ethics Review Committee still must make the determination. Then there are studies that are called expedited, has nothing to do with the speed with which the turnaround time. It is a category that stipulates the kind of data you're dealing with, that deals with, like, the specimens that have already been collected and for research purposes, whatever. And then we have the third category, which is the full review. Protocols that could be sensitive in nature, the level of risk is above minimal, and involves vulnerable subjects. So it has to go to a convened IRB.
But if a theological study is being done which has to do with the biblical exegesis, and we know it has nothing to do with human, does it still have to come to RIB?
No, because we said IRB deals with studies that only involve the human subject.
Okay.
The human subject that you can obtain, from whom you obtain data, either through intervention or interaction, or you are using data that is existing that has identifiable private information. Anything out of that does not need to come to IRB.
I think the situation now is slightly different in Kenya, because we are saying who determines that this one does not require. It can't be the researcher.
Yeah.
It can't be yourself. It has to go through the committee. Then they'll be able to say, this one, for reasons 1, 2, and 3, it does not require any further review. So, but they'll still issue with a document to say that they have looked at it. But it's not at your discretion to say, now this is
exempted.
Yeah, this is exempted, it doesn't require human, and so on and so forth. Just like people used to argue about data. They were saying, I mean, why? You see? But now we are saying even data, for somebody just to verify that this data is not identifiable, and somebody must read through it.
Okay.
Then there was the issue of using organs, and I don't know whether you included amputated organs. If you did, then you know the traditions and beliefs that people have. If you take off my leg, I must know where you want to take my leg. And therefore, I must give you consent on how to do it. Because some others will say, no, we must go and bury our leg. So you'll not just pick it. I think there is a level of consenting the use of certain body organs based on our traditions that we have in our own cultures.
Yeah, let's get one question from the audience. Who is number 3?
Can I?
Yeah.
Yes, it's me back at the, just right at the back.
You are at the back.
I'm following up with the question, Dr. Ganu, you asked regarding theological research. In the theology department, we engage human subjects, but I think not so much on their lives, but maybe on the practices, issues, probably in the manner in which they respond to some of their convictions of life. I'm just wondering whether that will require the procedures outlined so far of the IRB.
So anytime you engage in research, and anytime you engage human subjects in the research, it has to go to the Ethics Review Committee. So if you are collecting data from them, either through an interview, and they are responding for purposes of your research, or they are completing a questionnaire that is something that needs to go to Ethics Review Committee or IRB.
Okay. Yes, let's get, yeah, right here. Where is the microphone? There is a question here.
My question is simple. In the presentation, you mentioned legal consent. The word legal, can we, the format you gave, can I do something and say it is legal, or I need to see a lawyer to get it drafted very well? Also, on the word of legal, with the director's presentation, you give an example saying that when there's a problem with someone's work, you recommend to the school to take action. But in your presentation, you mentioned that your work is legally bound. So can we have a distinction? Whilst you have a legal mandate to act, why are you referring to the school to take action on the researcher who has gone against the ethics?
I think the last part, when it comes, for example, you have investigated the case of fabricated data, okay? The Act is not very specific on what penalty that should be given to that kind of a misconduct, okay? Now, fabricated data you have gone to the lab and exaggerated figures, and you have used that to do all that, that's fabrication. Now, we are saying this is wrong from a research perspective. The only penalty that, because there is no explicit clause within the law that would say when you fabricate, then you're taken to court on this reason. So the best thing is that this is academic work. It has been done. It has breached the protocols, and these are the findings. So based on us, legally, there is no research that was undertaken. So if research was not undertaken, so what is the consequences of you getting a degree or a diploma? The thing is, you must do the degree or the research work as part of fulfillment or requirements for either a grant of a master's or a PhD or whatever certificate that you may be looking for. So that aspect is missing. So what does the university do? We leave it to the university now to decide. But where the law is explicit, like in the case doing research without a license, that is straightforward. The law is there, you'll be taken to court, that's it.
Okay.
So the first part of your question, legally appointed, is actually court appointed. It is not you preparing and making it legal. The court has to appoint a guardian or a representative or any other individual who is given the powers to do that kind of appointment would make it legal. And so therefore that would be the reference or the context to which I was speaking. In the US, we have what we call, the government guidelines, the regulations. But we also have what is called the written procedures by the institution. So at Andrews, we also have our own ethics review committee written procedures, because when we apply to be registered, we have to indicate how we would be determining things locally. I think maybe that is what we currently may not have within our institutions here. And so it specifies how we deal with cases on when people commit violations.
But at the same time, if it's written consent, then that's also admissible as a document in a court of law in the case there is dispute. So that is why it's important for you to do. That's why it becomes legal. If I give you a document and I've signed it, that becomes legal in the sense that it's admissible as evidence. You'll be asked to confirm, and people who can read the writings will say, is this you who wrote? It's either yes or no, and therefore you'll be judged based on that.
Thank you. Let's take one question here, then we'll come to the audience. There is this question, there are two questions, but I'll tie the two of them together. It says, do we need RIB approval to analyze data and present results from a routine work. Routine.
So, two key things. You need IRB when, one, you are involved in research. You are conducting a research study, and that research study involves human subjects. Either you're collecting data directly from them, or you are using secondary data that has identifiable private information. When in doubt, submit, and the IRB or the ethics committee will determine.
Okay. But it's also unethical to just collect data and use. Yes. For example, you're calling it routine. There is a doctor that is seeing patients on day-to-day basis. That is routine. You go there, he meets another one, he meets another one, and he meets another one. And then now he takes that data because it's routine work and he converts it into a research study. Very unethical. It is not allowed. It should not happen.
Good. It's very clear. Any question? Okay, give the microphone to him.
Thank you. I have first question is, what do you do with someone who is doing a foreign degree? For instance, is doing in Makerere. Should he submit or seek approval from Makerere, or should he? But he's collecting data from Kenya. Should he get 2 approvals or 1 approval from Makerere? That's 1. 2 is whether if someone is getting information from an institution, such as companies, a group of companies, is that human research such it requires something like an approval?
Before you answer, Mr. Wakesa, maybe let me add these so that you can explain the two together. This is an international school. We have our students scattered all over the continent. If a student, one of our students is in Ghana, for example, but she's a student in our program here, and she is about to collect her data for her thesis, similar to that question, where does she seek approval from? You know, the RIB, does she seek the approval from RIB in Ghana or here? And even permission to collect data. The school is here in Kenya, but the student is in Ghana. So how does it work?
We want data that is obtained here is what is subjected to review. Yeah. We cannot subject data collected in Ghana for review in Kenya. If the school has other arrangements, it can. But if you are registered in Uganda, Makerere University, and picking data here in Kenya, it must go through an IRB.
So it's where you are collecting the data?
Yes. If you are bringing in also data from Ghana to work on it here in Kenya, then you require as well. If you are bringing that data as well, because it depends on what kind of data that you are talking about, because we know, I've said in my presentation, that if it's a plant material, for us, I mean, even for us, ethical review, if it's plant material, then you require other, I mean, for you to bring in that material, there are other agencies that must allow you to bring the materials. Mm-hmm. If you're also bringing in specimens, there are also the same institutions that allow you to send human samples out are the same ones that will want to give you an okay for you to bring those. And if it's for research, they'll want to see an approval from here before they allow you to bring in the material.
And that's exactly what we do. We've had students who collect data from Kenya. And so before we provide approval for them over there, we have to get approval from, first of all, the institution, the place where they are collecting the data. And that place has to link, because they submit the application to NACOSTI also. So we give them approval, and the AUA, for example, would give approval, and then they submit to NACOSTI. And that is just the way it happens in the ethics review world.
Okay. Yeah, let's take that question.
Nice. Good afternoon. Mine is probably an observation and probably to Nakosti. I noticed earlier here when we were asked a question about the percentage of plagiarism. I think there was no standard answer that was given by any of us. I believe every university probably has a different percentage. But I was thinking, as Nakosti, as the umbrella body, for example, in Kenya, should probably have a guideline which can assist people, because I think they are the final body. If all these proposals and probably research reports have to end up in Nakosti as a repository or whatever, I think we should have some guideline from Nakosti. The other, probably, perhaps you might comment on that, Dr. Okesa. The other thing is about the informed consent. I was thinking of most of these proposals and research reports come from our students either doing MSc, Masters, or PhD. And in most cases, they do not have any grants. They are self-sponsored and all this. And there is the element of cost in terms of time and materials and so on, which we also have to take care of. They also have a limited time within which to do their research. It looks like the addition and the things we are talking about may add a lot of cost or time in terms of cost to the most of these students, so that they may not be able to carry out their research. I don't know to what level we expect our, for example, master students and probably any junior students who are doing a research to go in terms of this process. Perhaps some discussion or information on that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for the first one. Point noted. I think it's something that we need to discuss and find out what percentage is allowable. I agree with you. Every university and other institutions have their own percentages. Many of them are below 10% or 10% and below. Issues of research being expensive and people doing masters and PhD. Actually, research is expensive. It's not cheap. And what we are saying now in terms of quality, and from where I sit, if we are doing research, can we do it procedurally? Okay. We have had some discussions with the universities before. There was a time we could return back the thesis. They have been signed off by the supervisors, and they would argue that they have gone through the graduate school and so on. Then we bring them together and say, okay, let's go through this again with sober minds. And many of them came to an agreement that there is quite a lot of shoddy work that may have happened in some of them, and they just passed them. And that is no longer an issue. When we reject, we have good reasons for rejection, and we'll give reasons, and it must go back. So, so whether it's master's, PhD, or undergraduate, I think let's do the right thing. Let's not say this is a first degree and therefore we ignore certain steps. Or it's master's and we ignore certain steps, and PhD the same. Give you a final example on this. You find this is a proposal, a student is investigating factors that are affecting performance in Laikipia County. Masters. Factors that are affecting performance in Laikipia County. PhD. Really? Really? So you ask, where is the master's and where is the PhD in this work? You must demonstrate there is a PhD as opposed to a master's. And if you are going just to allow these things come, then what kind of graduates do we want to produce? Them, they are going to become supervisors of tomorrow. This is my humble request that, ladies and gentlemen, let's just do the right thing, irrespective of whether it's master's or PhD. We have gone ahead in this country, let me tell you. Government of Kenya has put in what we call STI mainstreaming, and science, technology, and innovation mainstreaming in performance contract of ministries, government departments, and government agencies. We are coordinating that as NACOSTI. Some of them argued they were just doing simple research work to inform their processes. We have sat down and we have said, if you're doing research of whatever kind, can we follow the conventional methods so that the outcome of that research can actually stand the test of time? And now we are in that agreement. And so even what they used to call customer satisfaction survey, we are saying they must follow the conventional methods, the theories behind, and the methodologies they are using must be very clear for that research to be acceptable in this country. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more. We hope that when at the end of this training, that we can go back and teach ethics. We start teaching ethics from the home, people who are not even undergraduate, so we can change the culture in the places where we are. You see, an undergraduate student has the capacity to produce high quality work. And so we have to teach them that if you are going to do a research, it is methodical and you need to plan time. You know when to start, you need to go to the ethics review committee, you need to invest time to produce something good. And we all benefit at the end. And so let's not help them to rush the work because that produces low quality work. They need to engage meaningfully by investing real good time and to do it ethically. And we will go for adding knowledge to the knowledge base.
Thank you very much. Any last burning question? Okay, last one. Okay, let's take the last two. Then we are done for the day. The microphone.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Ben Make from KISS University. My training is in computer science. And I've been hearing human subjects, and why are they not talking about data or algorithms or things to do with performance here and there? So at what point then are we going to appreciate that computers are here? And sooner or later, they capture information about us. So is this only about animals or technology is also coming into it? I know of maybe in the near future how technology might, quote unquote, take over, should I say almost everything. And there's something that is known as transhumanism, for example, whereby they want to use technology or computers to make humans better, quote unquote. So I'm really just concerned that where or at what point are we supposed to appreciate computers are here? In any case, my students, for example, at the university level, when I'm supervising, let's say it's master's or PhD, if it's computer science, I tell them, no, it's performance. We're not going to do what? Collect data out there. In any case, we have data sets online that can be utilized to test some of these computing aspects. So is that what we're supposed to use? Do we need to come to you people for either? But I think it's not really necessary. Thank you.
Well, when we teach research ethics at our university, that's one of the areas we actually do it every year. I do it, okay? Because we collect a lot of data through computer and the internet. So we talk about the big data. So when you talk about the algorithms and you begin to see the amount of data, globally, for instance, Google, when you go to England, they control the hyperlink, the HTTP. So the amount of data that is collected from the people is really controlled by the government regulations. It is more liberal when you go to the USA. They collect a lot more, Google does. And I'll give you a quick example here. So that was 2015. I go for government training in a place called Annapolis, Maryland. And so big data presentation was one of the major components of the ethics training there. And so there was a case that was captured. This gentleman, the daughter, received a package from Walgreens, is one of the major pharmacies in the United States. And they had sent her a package of somebody who is expecting. And this is a young girl, not 18 yet. And so he was furious when the package was delivered. He said, they must get it wrong. How did she? Well, she had been shopping or viewing things online that only a pregnant person would do. And all this data was being collected and sold to Walgreens, so they are seeing a prospective customer here, and so they want to start engaging the customer early. So therefore, they delivered. Out of that, the father was able to discover that the daughter was actually pregnant. So a lot of data is being collected, and we have to know how to navigate and to relate. So for us, it is within already. It's not something in the future, but we are already collecting data from people through the internet, and that deals with a lot of human subjects.
The last one.
Thank you. My name is Julia Sangwenyi from Kisii University. I'm just making a follow-up on my second question, which was probably it was not answered. I asked on the issue of someone carrying out a research on organizations or institutions. For instance, it's operations of foreign companies in Kenya, whereby he has even need to get information from the mother countries where those organizations are registered. Under those circumstances, where do you require the approval?
Yes, you require. I told you we have reformed. Now it's called Institutional, Scientific, and Ethics Review Committee. So that is the committee you need to take your work to be reviewed. They'll decide, they'll read it, and they'll decide whether that does not requires exempt or not. If it does, they'll exempt it, but they'll still issue with a clearance letter to show that they have gone through it, and I think it doesn't address ethical issues of concern.
Okay. Our DVCF will be the last person, then we are done for the day.
Okay. The computer scientist, you need to partner with human subjects researchers, because I remember when I did my dissertation, I did it with simulated data. Because what I wanted to study, I could not do with the human beings. I could not control the abilities of people who are walking. But I needed to compare abilities, and therefore I had to control the abilities to get what I wanted. So I used simulated data. So there is place for computer scientists, and there is place for other researchers, human subjects. It depends on what research is being conducted. So in your case, if you want to know where computer scientists fall, I would love to partner with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe we have had a very fruitful day. How many of you agree with me? Thank you so much. We began the day with a devotion from our DVCA, and she reminded us that you, as the human being, you are a researcher in whatever you do. Show integrity in all that you do. And then we had the welcome remarks from our Vice Chancellor welcoming you to the university. And he mentioned that find time to go around and look at our beautiful campus, university. Then we had the first training session, the emergence of institutional review boards from Dr. Dwayne, and we learned a lot from that. Then came our guest of honor for the day, Professor Walter O. Oyawa, who was represented by Mr. Wakasa. Then our second training session was delivered by Dr. Modikaya Ongo. He talked on ethical human experiment, on ethical human experiment, and he gave many examples that were not good. Then we went for our question and answer forum. Then we took our lunch break. Then we came for our third training session, the 3 basic ethical principles. What are they? What are the 3 basic ethical principles? Who remember? Dr. Boniface actually talked about it. Beneficence is one. Then he talked about respect and justice. Don't forget those 3 basic ethical principles. And our last training session for the day was delivered by Dr. Ongo on informed consent. Then we had our Q&A session. With this, we will end today, but before we end, let's take this announcement. Those of you who signed for supper will be served at 6 o'clock at the same place you ate your lunch. So please go there at 6 o'clock. Don't forget your card. Go with your card. I want to talk to you about AHSRA, or Adventist Human Subject Researchers Association, Africa. We are a chapter. We have the international body, and the president is here. Dr. Dwayne, could you stand up? Yeah, that is the president for AHSRA International. These are a group of researchers who have come together to form this association, and we learn a lot. We conduct conferences, academic conferences, we conduct training, and so we are inviting all of you to join AHSRA Africa, Adventist Human Subject Researchers Association. If you are interested, you can see me after the session. You can also talk to Dr. Willie. He's around. I think he's outside. And then in September this year, we will also have another research conference for the School of Postgraduate Studies for the Adventist University of Africa. We've been projecting the, Dr. Willie, please come and join me here. That is the executive secretary of AHSRA Africa. I am the chair, but he is the secretary of AHSRA Africa. Dr. Willie, do you want to say something little about this association? 1 minute. Yes.
Good afternoon. The association is live and kicking, and we have a membership from the rest of Africa and the rest of the world joining us. You are not going to be left out. If you are left out, you need to be here.
How much does it cost to join this association?
For you to join the association, you need only $20.
For 5 years?
For 5 years or 3 years?
For 1 year.
1 year.
For 1 year.
So for 3 years, the membership, you can be able to decide to pay for 3 years, which is $60, and then you renew after 3 years.
Can you tell us one or two benefits of joining the association?
Now, the benefits is that you're going to get a team of researchers, well-established researchers whom you can be able to collaborate with. That is one benefit. The second benefit, we are planning to apply for several grants. That is very, very important for researchers like you and me. And we have a diverse team of people who are in different fields. And this is one of the weaknesses we've had in the church, to find people to cooperate with in various fields that we are having. And because we have different people with diverse backgrounds, we are sure you will be able to meet a great team of individuals who will be able to lift you up in terms of research aspect and in everything that
And there are people listening to you online and here. If somebody would like to join this association, how will he do it?
Yeah, it's a matter of, we have an online way of sending. Our treasurer is here. We can be able to give us the details.
Just give us a WhatsApp message or email.
Yes.
And then we will help you.
Yes, we have the registration at aua.sc.ke. You can be able to send an email over there, or you can also contact the AHSRA Africa Secretary at aua.sc.ke, and we will be able to guide you accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. At this time, I would like to invite our DVCA and then Mr. Wakesa up front here, please. Mr. Wakesa has spent the whole day with us. Can we appreciate him by giving a round of applause? Thank you so much. We appreciate your time with us, and we appreciate the knowledge you have imparted to us. I will give the phone to our DVCA to just say one or two things, and after that, we will allow you to go.
I started saying this in the morning, that we appreciate NACOSTI very much, because anytime we have had any event and we have asked them to come, they have come. They have responded. So we thank you. And we thank you also on behalf of our government, the Kenyan government, for having a parastatal that works with us. So we are privileged here, and it is not easy to get them to be with you the whole day, like Mr. Wekesa has been with us the whole day. Professor Yawa was here with us for graduation the whole day also. So we are grateful to the services that we get from NACOSTI. We are aware that the cost of gas has gone up. And so as Professor Ganu had planned, we didn't want you just to go like that, because you may get stranded on the way there. As much as you are government, I believe that this was our responsibility. And when we have time, we take your time out of your work time. We are responsible for gas that brought you here. So, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ganu. And take our greetings to Professor Yawa and to the rest of the NACOSTI team. Thank you.
Thank you, and our prayer is that the Lord will take you home safely. Before we close, I would like to invite Dr. Ongo to pray for us to close the day. What time are we coming tomorrow? 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Thank you. Stand up.
May we rise so that we can pray. Let us pray. Kind and loving Father in heaven, we are so grateful that you gave us opportunity to assemble here as researchers and administrators to learn together. We thank you for this opportunity. We thank you for the University, Adventist University of Africa. We thank you for NACOSTI. We thank you for all the participants who came here today, Lord. You have led us and you've enriched us. We ask that as we now part to go back to our residences, that you will grant us peace, you grant us wisdom, and that you bring us back again tomorrow morning. Provide us opportunity to continue enjoying the good health and this beautiful campus, oh God. May you prepare us for your soon return, and may we be ready at all times, clinging and focusing on that return faithfully. We ask this, trusting and believing in the loving name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Thank you, and may you have a restful rest of the day. Thank you. See you tomorrow.